Happy Monday and welcome to the John Sanchez Show here on News Talk 780 KOH. This is Jason Gaunt. It is going to be me and Sanchez tonight, but a different Sanchez, the Brainiac AI version of the Sanchez clan. Dr. Dennis Sanchez, how are you, my friend? Happy
I'm
Monday.
doing great. First time we've done a show, just the two of us.
I know. I'm surprised they let us out.
I guess no one else was in the building at the time.
It's true. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, giddy 49er fan. Sorry about that, Jack. It was a good game for sure. I have to do my best to be on best behavior today. But no, I'm fired up. We've got a pretty cool topic to go over. AI agents. Sounds edgy. I think the little bit of teaching to our wonderful listeners as to what the heck that means is going to be a lot of fun. I know you're going to dip in and sort of help folks understand a little bit about how AI and sort of the next step in using AI, not in a Google type manner where people go in and think that they're AIing when they're basically just using search functions, but getting this tool to do things for you. Why do you think that'd be a good topic, Dennis?
Well, there's a mystique around it. There's been a mystique. Agents have been around for a long time. But you're seeing things in the news like I was just reading today, McKinsey CEO Bob Sternfeld said, "Hey, I've got 60,000 employees and 25,000 of them are agents, AI agents." So,
wow.
You got the reality over here, and then you have really a lot of people that don't know anything about them. And so let's kind of delve into that mystique a little bit. It's just software when you get right down to it, but they're getting, excuse me, so involved in our lives and work that we have to pay attention, and it's not so complicated as it might seem.
No, that's awesome. I'm excited. I'm very excited, but I'm also excited to point out that we had a green market today. We had a Dow that was up 86 points, 0.17% to 49,590. The S&P 500 closed higher by about 11 points, 0.16% to 6977, and the Nasdaq up 62 points, 0.26% to 23,733. Gold, silver, both very strong today. Gold was up about 2.4%, 4608, and oil higher by 1.22%. Some angst around our president and lots of comments coming out of the White House. One of which that Jerome Powell was going to be facing the scrutiny of the government in a different manner. This isn't surprising. We've been assuming something was coming down the line to threaten his existence, but they're going to be having a deeper dive around some of the comments he'd made back in July to House testimony around costs with the new Fed building, of which he doesn't strike me as some opulent cat who is trying to usurp funds from others. My guess is there's more smoke than fire, especially given it's January and we're going to have a new Fed person in May. Not sure why we need to go down this route, but hey, we did. And I think that questions the Fed and some of the concerns there. Those are topics and reasons why the market was in the red by 0.75% on the Nasdaq early on, but moved back into the green. So, like you said, stocks don't lie, right? This market tends to want to be pushing higher, and S&P at 7,000 and Dow at 50,000 seem like the next signpost in front of us. We'll cover other news items too, but why don't we jump right in? Because I think this is a good topic, and we'll probably have quite a bit to talk about it. Can you walk us through what an AI agent is? It sounds pretty cool.
Sure. Excuse me, getting over a cold. It seems like it's been a while.
That's
but
why John's gone.
Still doing it. Yeah, I know, it's the same thing. In fact, I was with him last week, but no connection.
No.
I like to start with the word agent. What is an agent? Because that's a common word. And then we slapped AI in front of it and said, here's a new word. But start with the word agent, agency, and that's something that's acting on your behalf. So an AI agent comes in many shapes and forms, but basically it's working for you. Of course, that definition has expanded to the extent where there are some that don't work for you, work very autonomously, in fact, lead other agents. But when you get right down to it, this is software doing something, programmed to perform a certain act, whether it's usually pursuing a goal, using reasoning, step-by-step processes, very related to processes. And that's the first place really where AI agents found resonance. It was, let's look at processes. Let's look where there's redundancy, things we do over and over that we could, if we could get somebody else to do that work, then we can go do something else. And it's in the simplest form. That's what these tools are. And the fact that they connect to databases and can work in just about any environment. And there's tons of versions of them already, makes it something like they're everywhere. And they're probably agents working right now on this broadcast as we're talking. So, but they're in the background, and they're very, very helpful.
Yeah, you had a line in your notes here that talked about agents as doers, not just talkers. Can you help a little folks understand that a bit more?
I think the first reaction to most people, because there was a transition between chatbots and agents, really being pretty much the first real opportunity for agents to show ROI and make a difference. And so you've transitioned from chatbots, which basically just talk to you and don't do things on their own, can direct, but that's often the first connection people have with a business, to chatbots that started thinking a little bit and doing a little bit more, and maybe even having a dialogue with you. Now we're getting into an agent aspect of it, so it's morphed into something else. So that's the difference. They acting on your behalf, not just talking, but they are workers. They're like worker ants.
And that's it. We're at the point now, probably where most of us are interacting in some way, shape, or form, as you mentioned, with agents. I told a story pretty recently where I had to update a subscription for Sirius, right, the satellite radio thing, and kind of pushed back a little bit on the price, right? They changed it after a year or whatever, and opted to upgrade me to something that cost me 3x the amount, and I was like, no, I'm all set. So I went on the app, and started chatting with this thing, which, right, like you said, chatbot, in my opinion, was sort of the first gen, right, where you say things to it, and 90% of the time it doesn't understand you. You can't really get, you don't get a heck of a lot of help with it unless you fill one of these 4 things that it wants to answer questions on. Well, I went in and I said I wanted to, they asked me, what do you want to do? I said I want to cancel the subscription. And it asked me why. Like, what is your problem? I mean, I'm like, I have many problems, but specifically to you, it costs too much. And I was that simple. I just said it like I was, you and I were texting, while watching a game or something. And it said, well, tell me a little bit about your information, blah, blah, blah. I logged in, and it said, well, how about $15 a month? Because it had bumped me up to 22 from what was 6. And I was like, nah, that's still too expensive. I was paying, $6 before. And it says, I can do it for $9.39, like a weird number. It wasn't like one of those round, simple, right? So there's some mathing, there's some thinking going on there with, go back and look at all the historical average of what he's paid over this whole period of time. And I've had it for a long time. And short story long, I kept pushing back, and eventually it got down to like $6.08 a month. And I'm like, great, that's fine. And it says, okay.
You got me.
And it was the fastest thing. It was not thinking, taking time. It was as if you were chatting with a buddy, again, about a game or a play or whatever. And within 30 seconds, it updated me, got me, said, starting on this day, you're going to now pay $608 a month. We've got it all processed. Is there anything else you need? Like, it was debating with me. It was, it wasn't just a drop, and say no. There was mathing going on, and there was a lot more involved than what we've historically been used to. And that's just a simple example of training something with data to be going and accessing different parts of your business, but to ultimately solve a need that was historically some chat in some place in some other country. It's pretty impressive where things have gone.
Well, when you walked away from that conversation, how did you feel? Was it a high level of customer satisfaction?
100%. Yes, very
So
very much so.
I've read some things, for example, about estate planning, where surveys have said that people actually are more comfortable talking to a chatbot than they are a human about certain things. So we've over time developed that trust, and of course, that carries over into other areas like medicine and areas where you're listening to some advice. I know I was chatting today and with Copilot and asking about the flu bug, and should I be concerned about certain things? He says, no, these are the trends. You're okay. You're not going to die today, Dennis.
Right.
Stuff like that. Okay.
This
Great.
burning sensation, and you're like, I don't want to talk to a person. I'd rather talk to a machine because I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and it is. I think once people get past, like I mentioned, the using AI interaction, chat, agent interaction, less like you would a search engine and more of an iterative person to go and do the data crunching and the action that you're looking for. It's going to be pretty interesting to see that evolution because you don't have to be a complex mind to get real comfortable with it.
We'll go over that a little bit because the coding is almost disappearing entirely. You get into something like vibe coding, which is you can create agents without any code. You're basically using the same type of interface as any LLM software solution, talking to it, saying, "Hey, I want to create this application that does this, this, this," and then it creates it in about 3 minutes.
It's
no
incredible.
code.
It's incredible. Let's dig into it after the break. But why don't we first check in with Kristen Snow in the Right Now Traffic Center? How are you, Kristen? Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show here on News Talk 780 KOH. This is Jason Gaunt, joined by Dennis Sanchez. Today, the Dow was higher by 86 points, 0.17%, 49,590. S&P higher by 11 points, or 0.16%, to 6977. And the NASDAQ, it was higher by 62 points, 0.26%, to 23,733. Gold is now lower in the new session, but still above the 4,600 level. Oil here trading 59.75 last. That is 25 cents higher, or 0.42% on the day. One would have thought if we hooked into all this Venezuelan oil, the oil prices would be going lower, but the first move has been almost 8% higher since the announcement that took place a week or so ago, I guess it was. Yeah. But on to more exciting things. We've been talking about AI and agents, and I love listening to these guys and sitting on the outside. Today I get to be on the inside, and we were talking about AI agents being, doers, not just talkers. I gave a story about interacting with Sirius XM's AI agent, and Dennis made a comment about vibe coding and how you could build one tonight. And not that we're telling anyone to go out and do it, but know that you can spend a little bit of time and develop the skill set to use AI and use these agents on your own behalf. And I was interested to at least get his thoughts on how simple it could be.
Well, my application was over the holidays. I had an idea of creating an interactive training session where an individual could ask the agent questions and have that Socratic dialogue going back and forth, and based on the responses, the agents score their ability. This would be for a sales application.
Nice.
I went to a company. There's a lot of them. You can try this stuff for free. That's what's amazing with all this technology. So much of it you can just try for free. And I worked with it and put all that stuff in, and it created. I would say within 15 minutes, it created a standalone app that did everything I asked it to do. There were some other things I wanted to do in addition to it, but it was a start, and they really position it as being great for prototyping. So if those of you out there who have that burning idea, gosh, I wonder what that would look like, you don't have to know coding or anything else. Just if you can explain it, they can build it.
Yeah, and I think so much of this is about iteration, right? You're not going to go create the thing on first swipe that you were envisioning. And, I would argue some of the best things probably weren't the first idea for most of these multi-billionaires anyway. It was a bank shot on something that popped into their head. But, much like all of these tools is you got to get a start and, just set a bite-sized thing. Here's what I want it to do. And then, like you've mentioned before, just start to talk to it, start to iterate a bit. How does that process work from how you use it?
Well, when I first started using generative AI type of solutions, I had been taught, how strictly you had to prompt and they called it prompt engineering. There's still, I can see the difference, but most people don't need to have that level of prompting. If you work with it a lot, I know you do too, that's the last thing you're thinking about. You're just spewing. You're talking to it just like you are another person, putting stuff in there. And you can even use the microphone to capture most of this stuff. And that's where you start. I think we are also carrying over some of the things we learned with software development, which was how software is created. Software, you don't create software in one day. It's like you said, iterations. You start with as many ideas as you can generate. So, when you're using an agent or this type of technology to just explore ideas, they're infinite in what you can come out with. So, but that and just, I think everybody's accepted a new kind of form of what's acceptable. We talked about the MVP, the minimum value,
Minimal
content
viable product, right?
Thank you. Yes,
it's
that
true.
you can deliver, and that's where you start and you get it out there. I think Microsoft is one of the best companies in doing that because, as an employee there, so much was you'd go, this seems like beta software, but that's sort of the things that are carrying over. There are some brands out there. And some solutions. I kind of like to, because there's so many choices, I like to start with some of the main brands that are out there. And I would invite everybody to do that because usually that means there's a lot of training, free training and stuff involved too. And usually that means there's a free try, way to try the technology. You can do that with everything. So I would say Microsoft Copilot, Studio. Those are two different things. When you get real serious, you use Studio because they charge you by how much consumption you're using and with your cloud stuff. Copilot Chat, just highly recommended because there's things in there already built. But the one that's kind of fascinating for me right now is Claude. And that my niece, not your niece, but my niece and I were working with it over the weekend, and she created an entire website from beginning to end, pages based on a concept. I would say it took about 10 minutes. It created all the HTML code, everything. Basically, we could take that and plug it into a website and it would be done. I mean, that's just another example of how far they've gone with these agents and what they can do.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned vibe coding, right? Where you're not. I said I tend to prompt almost like I'm doing C# code, right? Like select from here, take here, like almost when I'm thinking of moving data around in Excel. I think of it in how I want to get it to go here, do this, but I say it in the way that I would normally be coding it, right? Which you don't have to do. The machines are smart enough now to say, hey, take this and put it here and do this. But people all come at it from different ways, right? Like I mentioned, a lot of people start out just prompting like they would use a search engine, but it's so much more than that.
If you start, and we've said this many times, think of it as a conversation, a two-way conversation. Because if you listen as much as you're talking to it, you're going to learn a lot. And some of those suggestions, I could already say in like at least two hands how many very unique marketing ideas that I've created through. I think they're unique, but they're
They
some
are
people think they are
unique.
too.
It's whether they're
but
useful.
it's not just so you've heard about the slop, right? That the AI, a lot of people are saying, it's just
Yeah.
creating a bunch. Yeah, it's creating a lot of information, but just like in conversations, how many conversations are really, that brilliant or ones that stand out? Not very many. It just takes. I've seen such originality in this technology coming out. You have to be, but you have to be open to seeing it and accepting it and working with it to really take advantage of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So after the break, let's get into some of the starter tasks, like way that people
Yeah.
can start out to prompt or interact with agents on their own side. It'd be great to hear your experience. But
Okay.
why don't we check in with the Philadelphia Eagles fan, Jack Saban, in
Poor
the news.
guy.
He was news traffic and weather for
Poor
How you
guy.
doing? Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show here on News Talk 780 KOH. This is Jason Gaunt. I'm joined by Dennis Sanchez, the AI doctor. Today we had a Dow that closed higher by 86 points, or 0.17%, to 49,590. The S&P was higher by about 11 points, 0.16%, to 69.77. The Nasdaq higher by 62 points, 0.26%, 23,733. Gold continues a little bit of a slide, only down about $13, it looks like, here in the new session to 46.01, and oil just hovering below the $60 level. Some of the movers in the market today, as I mentioned earlier, Trump making comments about Powell, and even though he claimed he wasn't responsible, that it was Pulte ultimately that was going after Fed and the new building. That moved markets, certainly I think caused a bit of a rip higher in gold and silver today. There were some comments out of Donald Trump where he was looking to cap interest rates on credit cards at 10%. That caused some downslide in the Synchrony Financials and Capital Ones of the world. We will start to get bank earnings I'll touch on later this week. JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, all those guys will be out a little bit later in the week. So some profit taking. Banks have been quite strong over the last quarter plus. And, I think finally, keeping a close eye on the Iranian tensions. Those are always, concerning when the U.S. discuss getting back involved on a more serious scale. So that could, be a bit of the reason why we've had some upward pressure in oil prices as well. But rates were fairly contained today. 2s and 10s were only up about 1 basis point. So nothing alarming that the bond market was signaling. So catching up all caught up on the markets for now. But Dennis and I were discussing AI agents, and again, not trying to get too nerdy, but you gave a great explanation of them, now evolving to being more doers, and how each of us gave a little bit of stories of how we've utilized these things either through as a customer or as a builder. And I was hoping he could give us just a quick teach in on what are typically the first step when you're starting to, if it's creating something or looking to iterate against an agent on your side. What normally is your sort of first starting off point?
Well, I learned about agents through Copilot because they have free agents that you can build, and it's just part of if you go into Copilot Chat. You'll see the options right there on the left-hand side, create an agent. First of all, you can use ones that have already been created. That's a really good way to start, because you'll see how it was built and you'll see the steps. It's really very structured in the way that you create an agent. So if you see like what's underneath the cover, you'll figure it out so that when you do it, it'll actually walk you through the steps. I mean, when you're just going to answer some basic questions like, okay, what is the process that I want to, probably automate? Is it looking at my calendar and tell me, when the next big meeting is? Is it, is it something that it's a process such as filling a form with data that you do all the time, something like that? And then, once you've identified where are you going to get the data? So it's got to be pointed at something to bring that information from one place to another place. I mean, it's so fundamental and the simplest level like that, and they can get really elaborate, especially if you're going, well, what the what if situation? Well, what if the answer is yes, and it's going to go this direction? What if the answer is no? So it's pretty logical. That's a good way to describe it when you're building it like that. Now, that's not the vibe coding. Vibe coding, you don't even have to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest takeaway is if you're looking to do something yourself, like create a simple agent in any way you want to, is just continue to iterate. Ask it a question. Yeah. Here's what I'm thinking, even if it's broad, and you can start to filter things down. I mean, you can truly write a paragraph in there as to I'm thinking this, and I wanted to do that, and I want to do that, and and just brain dump, and then ask it to summarize what your request was, right? I often like to see that. Like, what did I just tell this thing to do? Versus, okay, here you go. So yeah, it's learning how to interact with it, and it's fun.
I think I've thought about the fact that the technology is moving so quickly. I think most people are going to experience agents not by creating them, but by just learning how to use them. And I'll give you an example. I use the Miro whiteboard, digital whiteboard. They've added an agent so that if you just explain what you want to visualize, it will create it for you. So instead of picking all the different things and having them out of line, well, I tested it, and we had a 30-step process that we're using, and it created a visual of the process just like you would map it if you actually knew what you were doing, and probably about 5 minutes. So, I mean, I'm interacting with an agent. I didn't have to know how to program. I just know if you know what you want, you can be clear about it. There's probably more skill there. And
those are things that you've helped us with internally about creating processes and manuals and all sorts of things that, like back in the day where people would create a PowerPoint to show you how to do this, and this. Instead, you can create this in somewhat of an agent format to interact with it, to say, well, if this happens from go look at our compliance manual, what should we do? Or if this happens, what should I do next? And it's great to think of that in all walks of life, right? You could theoretically create an agent that your kid could have on an iPad to say, hey, if this happens, or the oven, or the fire alarm's making a noise, like, what am I supposed to do now, right? And it can give you steps, and you can help in all ways to shape. It's just a simple idea of here's the information, here's the layout of a room, here's the layout of where the fire things are, and what's the smartest exit if this happens, right? Again, it's a sort of an extreme, but it shows you how simple it is, and then it's just you can really expand from there.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the investigation we're doing, discovery you're doing at Sanchez Gaunt, and looking at some of the process, such as some of the redundant ones, like taking information from one place and filling out those endless forms over and over and over, which all your clients love filling out. So they'll probably be disappointed when you automate that step for them.
It's their favorite.
But that's a good application, and we're looking at some solutions, some agents and stuff that the companies, they specialize in financial services organizations.
100%. And we've done a lot of work cleaning up all of our internal data. And when I say clean, just putting it in a very concise format so we can be able to pick and pull from places. Very safe, all inside of our own tenant, right? The nice part about Copilot, which you've talked to us too, is we're not going outside of our four walls, for lack of a better term, if I include the cloud that our data's on, to go back and forth with information. And you've mentioned this, security, right? How safe are things, as we've touched on a lot. If you're putting data into ChatGPT or Perplexity or something, make sure that's not personal data, right? Because you're training a large language model. It's leaving your four walls. It's going there. So, can you touch on how that works?
Yeah, it's a question you need to ask every time you work with a company that makes these kind of products, because you would assume that everybody has the same standard, and part of it is that there is a lack of some standards in AI because it's so new. AI is catching up with all that, but you can, if you're working, for example, with a Microsoft, I can guarantee you that you would be working with a product where they've built in, they've looked at security, they've looked at the ethics, they've looked at barriers. All of those things are built into it, so you don't have to do anything. There's some products that don't do that, don't
No.
offer it, and that you could get in trouble by, especially if you're working with an agent, you're looking outside your own environment.
Yeah, and you could bring things in that you may not want in your own environment, right? So
Yeah.
it's you want to always be cautious, like you mentioned, around the data itself as to what's being shared, right? You don't want to go paste a bunch of, say that you're at work, right, or have a small business and you work out of your own home and you have names and addresses and phone numbers and all. You say, hey, take this file and move it around like so. If you're using someone who doesn't have the best security in the world, that data is leaving. It's going somewhere.
That's right.
You're sending people's data outside of your four walls. And so, right, we've touched on that a lot, where that's really the core of what we've tried to do here is create the biggest, baddest walls we can before we even started touching the data. And I think that's something, too, that people need to think about if they're going to be using them in a business format to make sure that they're aware of how that all works.
Great points. And the last one I want to hit on very quickly is probably a mystique and myth about this has to be really expensive technology, right? That's just not true, especially with so many of these products free for you to use. And with no credit card involved, it shows to me like, well, it is a very competitive space. That's to our advantage. There's going to be new technology in this space all the time, and it can get really confusing when you get outside the main names. Like, is that a good product or not? But so many free ways to check it out without any kind of risk. And try them out. You're going to see different. It depends on what you need this technology for, and that can help you make your decision. And if you don't know what the right choice is, ask one of them. They'll be objective. I think that'd be a good way to test the bias part.
Are you bad? Are you bad? Yeah. That's awesome.
ChatGPT, should I use Claude?
Right, exactly. Right. Absolutely not. They're terrible people over there. Yeah.
I don't like him.
Well, thanks a lot. This is always a wonderful teaching. We've got a couple more questions. We can check in with you after the break, but why don't we check in now with Kristen Snow in the Right Now Traffic Center. Hey, Kristen. Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show here on News Talk 780 KOH. This is Jason Gaunt, joined by Dr. Dennis Sanchez. We've been covering all forms of AI agents and great ways to just start out using them, right? It doesn't have to be deep into the weeds, really, like we've talked about a bunch of times. It's about iterating and trying and doing a little bit of research beforehand as to which one fits best for what you're trying to do. A ChatGPT, a Perplexity, a lot of big corporations are using Anthropic through Claude. It has a bit of a different way of looking at things. Google Gemini, their new setup is very, very, very highly tracked now, where people thought Google was left for dead, and they've screamed ahead of everyone. So it's never a dull moment in this space, for sure. Speaking of dull moments, taking a look at the futures here, we got Dow futures are down about 41 points or 0.08%. S&P futures are down about 7 points or 0.10%. NASDAQ futures down 0.14%. Oil just scratching at that 60 level. 10-year bonds trading 417. Those are about a basis point lower right now here after hours. So in recap, Dennis, anything that you think is a major takeaway from this, if you're sitting on the other side of the speakers, to say for some people are still hesitant. They're nervous about these things. They don't quite know where to start. Any tips?
Well, if we go through these, the first one where agents are doers, not just talkers, yeah, probably a lot of people didn't realize in the background and the capabilities that agents have of really doing your work for you, which is
Yeah.
why they're so huge. Why they're so huge. Might be surprising to some people that there's no coding required, and you
Sure.
can build agents, even though they're so sophisticated technology-wise. They can still be built that way. The safety is in there, especially if you're buying a major brand. They've built in the guardrails. There's privacy, governance, things like that to control what the agent is doing. That's always a concern for some people. And the best place to start is just doing something kind of boring and repeatable and measurable, and that's usually where people start. And there's kind of no excuse for, if you're interested, taking it to the next step, because there's so much free product out there that you can experiment with.
Without any major details, you mentioned to me earlier about creating a board game. Can you tell me a little about sort of what you guys were doing? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Oh, it was fascinating. So I was working with Bailey, my niece, and we were brainstorming, looking for another way to educate clients about estate planning. And we said, let's just come at this at a whole different direction. So we asked Claude, what would be something wild and crazy? And Claude said, a board game. How about a board game? And so Bailey put in some parameters, describing what we wanted to do. And literally within 5 minutes, we had a working digital board game that would look like Monopoly, and it was that big with different questions, had a whole format. It would move the person along. It was truly a combination of a training course and a game, and was there already from concept to reality that quickly.
Well, that's
Amazing.
perfect. So everyone has a homework assignment. Go out and get your favorite AI and build a board game. Well, thank you so much, Dennis. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Really, really good. Well, and thank you all for listening. We'll be in touch with you soon. If we can help at all, 775-800-1801. Tune in out. John Sanchez Show, News Talk 780 KOH.
John Sanchez is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed by Sanchez Gaunt Capital Management, LLC on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of News Talk 780 or its parent company, Cumulus Media. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.